NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today. Good morning, early start on NUFC Matters today. It is Supermac and Gibbo joining me on Thursday as always. Good morning, lads.
Morning, Steve. Hi, John.
Good to see you. Good to see you. And as always, in a quiet week about Newcastle United, there's still plenty to talk about. And John, I'll start with you because it revolves around transfers. The ins and outs at Newcastle. Darren Eales, of course, last time we were on, had come out and given this message of FFP and Newcastle, may have to sell to buy moving forward. And then it's just started a merry-go-round of rumours. Some a little bit more substantiated than others. Bayern Munich, of course, bid once, twice, three times your lady to try and get Kieran Trippier to the Bundesliga, but it seems as if that's now not going to happen. Miguel Almiron linked with Al Habab in Saudi Arabia. Newcastle, open to talks, I guess, on that if they could get the money that they quoted, which was in excess of £29 million. Jamal Lascelles linked with a move to Besiktas and a chance to go and finish his career, I guess, in Turkey in a bit of heat, and that seems to have died a death. And Callum Wilson linked with moves to two Italian clubs, one Spanish club, so the Atletico Madrid, and one Italian club, Milan, AC Milan. Chelsea now supposedly interested in taking Wilson off our hands. So lots of conversation, no action as yet, other than Manquillo rejoining Rafa Benitez at Celta Vigo, and talk of a prominent youngster from Manchester City, young Alfie Harrison, coming to St James's Park. But other than that, John, nothing doing on the big names, it would seem, but still a week to go.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating week, hasn't it? Much ado about nothing at the end of the day, probably. Because, I mean, yes, let's be truthful, these things were happening. I mean, they're not speculation. Approaches were made to Newcastle United. Newcastle United let the cat out the bag by saying they might have to sell to be able to buy. Then everybody, all the troops in Europe just got on their chargers and set off for Newcastle. I said yesterday, and I stick by it now, I believe none of the deals will happen before the transfer deadline, simply because Newcastle haven't, in the main, wanted them to happen. Bayern Munich is dead now. They're looking elsewhere. They've gone from trying to get him on loan to a £12 million bid. And in fairness, for a 33-year-old, they're not going to make much more than a £12 million bid, are they? Because, it's a decent amount of money for somebody of that age. So it ain't going to happen. I said yesterday, I think they'll all stay. And I think they will. To be truthful, if it had been in the summer, I would have done any of the deals for the three big names. I would let Trippier go because we've got Livramento. I would let Wilson go because he's injury prone and he ain't. I mean, he's injured at the moment, for goodness sake. He ain't going to be available long enough and often enough, and he isn't. And I would let Almiron go because he tends to flatter to deceive. He runs like Usain Bolt and plays football at times like Usain Bolt. So, it's. And by the way, both are the wrong side. All three are the wrong side of 30. It's 30-year-old for Almiron, 31 for Wilson, 33 for Trippier. Why I perhaps am relieved that they've been turned down now is because it's so late in the winter. I would have still done one of those deals as long as I had somebody sitting in the departure lounge in an airport somewhere ready to come in. In other words, we spend the money. But to have sold one of them now and not bought, and by the way, if the one that went was Trippier, which is the one that really was the biggest one on, then we didn't want to buy a right back because we've got one. We wanted to buy, say, a midfield number 6 with the money. But unless we were going to have a body sitting waiting to come in, and who knows, perhaps we did. We don't know. But without a body to come in, it's bad business. With a body to come in, it's good business. And I would certainly sell the three of them, either one of the three in the summer. Although I'm not suggesting for 1 minute. I mean, Bayern Munich won't be back for Trippier in the summer. The two deals for Wilson didn't make sense to me from Newcastle's point of view because they were both on loan. There's nothing in it for Newcastle. It leaves them just with Isak unless they buy a centre forward. And he's on loan, so they're not getting a big dollop of money in. They're getting somebody off the wage bill, but leaving them with no centre forward outside of Isak. So it didn't make much sense. And Almiron is very reluctant to go to Saudi. Very, very reluctant to go. If it's up to him, he wants to stay. The other two would have been open to the transfer had Newcastle wanted it. But Almiron doesn't want to go.
Right.
John, great points. Go on, Malcolm. Give us your views on what you've heard this week.
Well, certainly I agree with John that there is no point in doing loan business at all, particularly loaning players out. Newcastle are short on numbers anyway, so what on earth is the point? And so I think they're right to have said no. I would have considered Bayern Munich's offer for Trippier if Newcastle could come out with a fair amount of money that would have allowed them to then go into the marketplace and buy what is actually required. Because as John said, Livramento can step into that right back position. He's hugely impressed me. I think he's impressed most people in the few games that he's played so far. Because he was ill, he missed the game completely, didn't he? The
last game with Man City, he was ill, Malcolm, but he's back training now.
Yeah, he's recovered. Good. Well, I'm delighted to hear that. It's amazing just how little business has been done in this January window, and that tells me that everybody is absolutely frightened stiff of the Everton punishment, something like that coming their way, and of course there's the Man City case that's under test at the moment. 115 charges. I hear talk of them being, if they're found guilty on the majority of them, that they'll get relegated to the Championship.
I mean, there's also Malcolm Everton again in Nottingham Forest, isn't it?
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, I think Nottingham Forest they've got a case, a strong defence, but it's going to be interesting because it's more down to dates than anything else. So
it's how you juggle trying to put buy into next year's annual accounts, which Newcastle have been trying to do with Lewis Hall. Take him on loan, buy him in the summer. He's in next year's accounts, not this year's accounts.
That's right. Yeah.
But,
So it's a new way of doing business, isn't it, for football clubs?
Yeah. It's unless you're Chelsea, then you just get a huge scattergun, go out in the market and blow everybody up, and just like confetti, and wherever a player lands, you sign him.
Well, when you think that Newcastle, I think they've been valued at 350 million. And yet Chelsea are valued at 6 billion. How on earth can they come up with such a valuation? 6 billion pounds. That means that their spending power is what, John? About 20 times greater than Newcastle's. It's sheer nonsense.
I'm glad, by the way, even though they're doing what they're doing, I'm off glad we didn't get their American as owners, because he's a crackerjack, him.
He is rather, isn't he? Yeah, it seems that he just doesn't understand any values whatsoever.
The buying policy, Malcolm,
the game of football.
If we've been cautious in the transfer market to stay on the right side of FFP, the transfer policy of Chelsea and the Greek guy at Forest has been quite incredible. They're just going by. Absolutely anybody that moves will have him. It's like, that thing that was on telly where you go around with a trolley in a supermarket. And you just throw everything in the basket as you're going around. Well, Forest and Chelsea have been running around with that basket around football for the last couple of transfer windows, haven't they?
Right, so new programme, Super Sub Sweep.
Yes, I say that quickly.
We've cheered somebody up anyway, lads. Tim Gill says, "Good morning from Germany. What a treat, Supermac and Gibbo live in my coffee break." Thank you, mate. Thanks.
Well done, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, but you won't be welcoming Trippier.
No, it doesn't sound like it. Kenya Mag says, "Good morning, lads. I've got a question for Malcolm. What was the reason he stopped taking penalties at Newcastle?" He says, "I'm sure he could have won more golden boots if he'd continued taking them. Did you stop taking penalties, Mal?"
Well, not my choice. I was quite happy to take penalties from the moment I arrived, and that's what happened. But then Terry McDermott came in, and I had missed one, and I think it was Keith Birkinshaw who said that Terry was to take over on that. And so I said, "And do I get the job back when he misses?" And he did miss, and I never did get the job back.
There you go. Yeah. Good stuff. Good story. Jason Foster says, "I'm at the point where I'm reluctant to read the junk in the press about comings and goings of our players. It's a load of toxic nonsense. It's hard to believe a thing that is written. Roll on February."
Well, it's all the guesswork, isn't it, that's being done by journalists and people on the internet. It's always the same, really, because Newcastle, they keep everything so close to their chest that very, very little actual news gets out. But there's still all the same number of column inches to be filled in newspapers, on television, and on the internet. And so, they start. They have to take guesses at what might possibly be happening.
What I've found interesting with Geordies, Malcolm, is that Geordies have always loved transfer speculation.
Yes,
but that is when it's coming in. Who are we going to buy? They don't like the speculation when it's going out. Are you going to get rid of Waddle, Beardsley and Gascoigne? Are you going to get rid of Supermac and Hibby? Are you going to get rid of Bruno and Isaac? We don't like that sort of speculation, but we like, are we buying a wonderful number 9? Are we buying a top midfielder, etc., etc.? We love stories about good players coming in. We hate stories about our good players going out.
Absolutely. John, and I'm just think back to what I always look on as one of the most disastrous periods in the history of Newcastle, when you talk of good players coming in, but Gascoigne and Waddle was sold all in a few short weeks.
And in a period of about a year and a half, Gascoigne, Waddle, and Beardsley all went, all Geordies, and at the end of it, we were relegated. Now, I was absolutely, apart from being furious, I think I could see it coming. I think a blind man could have seen that coming, and I've always said, if you can't hold on to budding Geordies, then you've got no chance.
Sure, and who would you point the finger at?
Well, the board took the money, and the board took the money and were happy.
McKeague was chairman at the time, was he not?
Sorry?
Was McKeague chairman at the time?
I'm not certain if it was Lord Bill. What happened? There was different managers sold them, so it wasn't obviously down to the manager. Jack Charlton sold the first one, Willie McFall sold after that, etc. But the thing was taken out of their hands by the board.
Yes.
And in fairness, after the first guy went, the other two guys looked at it and said, how ambitious are Newcastle? They're not ambitious, so therefore we're quite happy to go. If Newcastle aren't going to be ambitious, we'll go.
Right. Who was the first to go of the three?
The first to go was Waddle. Then it was Beardsley, and then it was Gascoigne.
Oh, really? Because if I were either Beardsley or Gascoigne, so the first one goes, Waddle, you said, didn't you?
Yes, yeah.
So the first one goes, and you think, what am I doing here?
Oh, yes.
Why am I here? Because it's obvious that we are not looking to be a successful club. We just want to put money in the bank.
And in that case, when you consider that Liverpool were in for Beardsley, who was next up, and Liverpool almost guaranteed trophies in those days, as now. And then Spurs with Terry Venables, Spurs and Manchester United were in for Gascoigne. So they've got to go because the signal's been put out there. We are an unambitious club. We aren't going to try to win something. And with the board more than happy to take the money, it happened. And of course, we didn't get the right replacements and we went down.
Yeah, and for the rest of the players in the dressing room, how depressing to see your star men all being sold off.
Oh,
dreadful. It must have been a really flat dressing room to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. And our friend Willie McFall was in the middle of that because he took over. Jack sold Waddle, and then Willie took over.
Okay, question in from Jimmy Dixon. Malcolm, he says, I've heard Ian St. John tell a story about Bill Shankly came into the away dressing room to have a go at you about something after a defeat at Anfield once. Can you confirm that this is untrue?
Is that what that last word says? Untrue.
Lads, we are all gentlemen on this show.
No, it's not. But Bill Shankly, he would go into the away dressing room, but no, he was always polite. Was Bill Shankly, and in all honesty, in all my dealings with him and my conversations and what have you, he was always very, very respectful. Always. So he wouldn't have tolerated an away manager going into the home dressing room and having a go at one of his players, and he certainly wouldn't have done it. But we used to have some very interesting conversations, very interesting. And I can tell you one, and it showed another side of Bill Shankly. And it was an evening game. And now I've got a feeling that who was I playing for? No, it was Newcastle, I'm sure, and we were playing an evening game at Anfield, and and I was putting an envelope for tickets to be collected at the ticket office, and I was putting them on for my younger brother, who was a law student in North London at the time, and Bill Shankly came along, and he said, "So who are you leaving that for?" I said, "Oh, it's for my younger brother." I said, he does enjoy getting to away games, travelling around the country. I said, "But he's a law student in London." Is he? He said, "He'll be arriving in jeans and scruffy shirt then, no doubt." And I said, "Oh, no doubt." I said, "Typical student." He said, "Give us the envelope." So he's taken the envelope away. And he said, "You leave it with me, I'll sort him out." And so my brother arrived, and there was an envelope. It was left by Bill Shankly, and it had a director's box ticket in it. And so he went up the stairs. Bill Shankly had kept an eye out for a scruffy lad coming up the stairs to the boardroom or to the director's guest room, and he took the lad into the guest room, got him a meal, made a comment sort of, "I bet you haven't eaten for days," sort of thing, typical student. And so he said, "How are you getting back home?" And my brother said, "Well," he said, I need to get the such and such train from sort of like the 10:05 from Liverpool down to London." And he said, "Right." He said, "You're very, very tight indeed." He said, "So when we get near to the end of the game," he said, "do exactly as you're told," he said, "and we'll get you on that train." So a steward came up about 7 or 8 minutes from the end of the game and leaned forward and said, "Mr. McDonald, would you come with me, please? We need to get you to the station." And this is all arranged by Bill Shankly. So he's followed the steward from the director's box downstairs, out of the director's entrance door, and there is a police car waiting for him. So he's been shown into the back of the police car, and the police car has done all the bells and lights, and has actually used an underground, because there's a lot of underground routes in a lot of cities, and Liverpool has one, and the police car actually came up on the platform, and there it was. He got into the train. It left about a minute later, and that was all organised by Bill Shankly, who you would have thought that his mind would have been on the game, but no, he took it all organised. Absolutely wonderful man. I think he was a man never to be crossed. He had his own individual way and his own thinking about everything. Don't cross him.
The interesting thing I think about Shanks, which he obviously done, he was one of the great characters of the game, like Cloughie, etc., and very successful. I mean, when he was playing certain teams and good teams, used to stand at the "This is Anfield" sign, which is above the tunnel. And as the visiting team was walking out in the line, used to tap on the "This is Anfield" sign and say, "You can run, but you cannot hide. You can run, but you cannot hide." And he's hitting the "This is the Anfield" sign. And by the way, he was absolutely right. You couldn't hide when you got out against Shankly's Liverpool side. And the interesting thing, his great goodbye to football, retirement, was the 74 Cup final against us.
Yes.
Because that was his last game in charge of Liverpool. He went that summer, and he tucked us up well and truly at Wembley. And if you remember, and Malcolm of course would, There was a live television debate. I think it was the night before the game, live on a split screen like this with Joe on one side and Shanks on the other side. And I think Shanks was like the snake that comes out of the basket. You know, I think Joe was transfixed by him. And I watched that interview and I said to myself, oh, we've lost. And then I got the team sheet. And when I got the team sheet, I knew we'd lost. But there we go. That was Shanks' goodbye to football. And here's the last bit, if trivia, and we're on trivia today, and why not? Who was Bill Shankly bought a player, and the day that player arrived at Anfield, having signed for Liverpool, he resigned. And so the player that was actually bought by Shankly never played one day for Shankly at Liverpool. Shankly resigned the day that player arrived at Anfield on the station platform, Line Street. And that player was a Geordie, Ray Kennedy.
Ray Kennedy, really?
Yeah, the day Ray Kennedy signed from Arsenal.
Yeah.
From Arsenal, the day he signed, and he travelled up to Anfield, got off the plane, went to Anfield and said, here I am. And they said, great, by the way, don't take it personal that Shanks isn't here to see you. He's just resigned. And, so he played for Bob Paisley, of course.
Yes, yeah. Well, I never. Well, that's amazing because, of course, Bob Paisley, he didn't play Kennedy for 18 months. And
not regularly.
At that time, he turned him into a midfield player.
Yeah, he did. He did. He was a centre forward who scored a pie. The difference was he was a centre forward that the same thing happened to Joe Linton. He arrived at one club as a centre forward and ended up as a midfield player.
Yes.
The difference between Joe Linton and Ray Kennedy was that Ray Kennedy had scored a pile of goals as a centre forward at Arsenal when they did the League and Cup double, whereas Big Joe wasn't scoring a pile of goals for Newcastle at centre forward.
He and John Radford.
Yes, but that's right. But both were centre forwards who were converted into midfielders who were good enough to win international caps. All Kennedy's international caps for England came as a midfielder.
Yes.
And of course, Joe Linton's caps for Brazil has come as a midfielder. But there we are, enough of the old trivia. We're going down a history lesson here.
Can it beat a bit of trivia, lads? Can it beat a bit of trivia? We're halfway through the show. Time for the ads. A big thanks to all our sponsors. Skips and Bins. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks again to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. If you'd like to order some, then give them a call on 01768 210 102. Go to the website mrvickys.co.uk or drop them an email info@mrvickys.co.uk. A big thanks to United Group Travel. They're a family firm based in Morpeth with pickups throughout the Northeast. No strangers on our tours, just people you haven't met yet. They've got a presence on Facebook and a website, unitedgrouptravel.com. If you want to make a booking, give them a call on 01670 632 460 or mobiles 0791 666 4174 0795 71 41654. Thanks to Darren Baldwin Funerals, independent funeral directors. Let us look after you in your time of need. They're based on Old Durham Road in Gateshead, and you can contact them at their website, darrenbaldwinfunerals.co.uk. Email darren@darrenbaldwinfunerals.co.uk or give them a call, 0191 478 2730. A big thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the technical side of things. And a big thanks to New Workwear. You can find them at newworkwear.com. If you want to help the channel, hit the thumb up to subscribe, hit the subscribe button, and share to your other social media. You can also pay a one-off fee of £25 to get a scarf, a cup, a pen, and a membership card. go to the website, nufcmatters.com, and click membership, or put your smartphone over this QR code. We also support the food bank on this channel. If you want to make some donations virtually, go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and make a donation today. We're also a podcast on Spotify, iTunes, and other podcast providers. Just search NUFC Matters. I'm also a part of the Northeast Footy Brekkie Show. You can listen to that Monday to Friday, 7 till 9 at thetooneuk.com. Okay, welcome back to NUFC Matters with Supermac and Gibbo every Thursday. I just want to give a shout out to the guys in Dundee who are putting on their very first event with Nobby Solano. I'll be up there hosting it. It is next month. Tickets are available on 0759 639 3387. Live music, 2-course dinner included, auction and raffles. Tickets £35 for standard. VIP, which I think is almost sold out, is £55. But that's for the Newcastle United Scottish Supporters Association. So looking forward to going up and doing that and seeing a few Scottish brothers and sisters. Should be a really good night. Okay, getting back to your comments. And Tom Dixon, thanks for this. I did see this earlier. Newcastle are 17th highest revenue generating club in world football, 7th in the Premier League. And the club revenue is expected to increase further by 2025 with Seller, Adidas, and this season's Champions League revenue. So, John Malcolm, you would expect really Newcastle next year, or in the summer perhaps, will have a decent arsenal to spend, a decent war chest, as Alan Oliver used to describe it, John.
Yes, you did. Yes, war chest, WOR. But yeah, of course, it's going to be significantly increased, and that's going to happen year by year, year on year. But there's some ground to be made up on the money. I mean, I think the bottom of the top six is Spurs, who are way ahead of us. And if we're ever going to get like Manchester City, that's going to take some time, obviously. But we're catching up at a rapid rate of knots. But you just can't jump from bottom of the pile to the top of the pile. You can a little bit in the league. We did that to a certain extent last season, from a relegation fight to fourth. But you can't climb as quickly on the finances. And but we're heading in the right direction at a good rate of knots. So that's good news.
Yeah. Because it was left in a bit of a state by Mike Ashley, as much that.
Dear me. You can't overcome that quickly, Malcolm.
No, and he limited the income by what he did for the club, which has held them back over the last 2 or 3 years. So hopefully now that all the ties have been cut and Newcastle can start to fly a little. And so the finances, really, they should seriously jump, John, I would have thought, over the next 12 to 24 months.
There's no question. There's no question. And I think now, and quite rightly, Newcastle are looking and seeing what they can get sponsorship deals for all over the place. I mean, I think the tea lady will be sponsored. The cup that I get me half-time drink in will be sponsored. And they're trying to raise money all over the shop because while they're wanting to maximize our income as quickly as possible, the one thing they don't want to do, which would bring in an awful lot of money, but they're respectful of us fans, they don't want to rename the ground from St. James's Park because they realise that that's been there for 130 years and fans don't want that to change. They might try to tag on a little rider on the end of it, like St. James's Park, ... helped by, sponsored by Joe Bloggs, or they're sticking something on the end just to, as I say, at the same time doing the teacups and the tea lady. But it will remain St. James's Park, I think, which is important.
Yeah, good stuff. What are the lads' thoughts on retaining what we have versus bringing players in? I'm happy to just go with what we've got, says Paul. The likes of Barnes, Murphy, Wilson coming back. It'll be like new signings anyway. Yeah, I mean, if we didn't do any business in or out, this transfer window. Malcolm, would you be happy?
Well, yes, happy-ish. I'm always a bit suspicious about the business that's done in the winter window anyway. It doesn't give you the kind of choice that you get in the summer. And so, yeah, I'm happy for Newcastle just to get themselves through to the summer and look to do business then. And of course, hopefully we're FA Cup winners by then.
That would be a lovely thought, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, what I'm doing, of course, because it looks as if that's the way it's going to be, not winning the FA Cup. I mean, not doing any business in the transfer market. I'm busy sorting out from my records pictures of Harvey Barnes, Elliot Anderson, and Jacob Murphy, so I can recognise them when they actually come on the pitch at St James's Park. Because it's that long since I saw them, I think I can remember what Jackie Milburn looked like more than I can remember what Harvey Barnes looks like.
John, I understand every word that you've just said, and I feel quite the same way. What kind of a player is Barnes? Do you remember?
We haven't seen virtually anything of him whatsoever, and everybody keeps falling off the end of the world for the season. First of all, Tonali decided that he was not going to be seen again, much to the dispirited Ladbrokes, and then after that we get Nick Pope, and then after that we get Joe Linton. I mean, why can't somebody be injured for 2 games?
Well, I know.
Instead of 2 years.
Yeah, just minor knocks, for heaven's sake. No,
absolutely.
No such thing in the Newcastle dressing room as a minor knock anymore.
I'm taking.
How many months is this one going to be missing for?
Well, I'm taking a bet because I'm talking about will I recognise Harvey Barnes when he comes back. I'm taking bets on what colour will be Joe Linton's hair when he comes back. Because will it be dyed or will it not be dyed? Because it does change rapidly, bless him, and it looks pretty damn good. But I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I might have no hair when he comes back. It's taken that long for some of these lads. Nick Pope, can you remember what Nick looked like? I mean, he just decided to have a rest down, and lean up against the post on the ground, and all of a sudden he was out for 9 months with a shoulder injury. It's got quite ludicrous, hasn't it?
Yeah, hasn't it just? Yeah.
Worst thing Ashley did was giving several fringe players long contracts on inflated wages. I would 100% agree with that. John's nodding his head as well. Darren says, are the club trying to force Miggy's hand to leave to cash in on him when the player wants to stay and fight for his place? I guess the only people who know the answer to that are the club and Miggy as well. What's your thoughts on Amanda diluting her shareholding? Any rumours as to why? John, this was an interesting story that broke this week via Company's House, which some people sit and watch with regards to Newcastle to get the story out there. But her shareholding's down to 6%, basically because she hasn't put any money in 2023. Obviously, withdrawn 3 separate amounts to cover legal fees. We presume, and I say it's only a presumption on our behalf, that potentially that could be for legal issues with Mike Ashley, which was mentioned when he left the club, that he wasn't happy about certain things and court proceedings would take place at some point. But yeah, I mean, 6% now, Amanda Staveley and Mia Dad. Are we seeing maybe a gradual withdrawal from their perspective? They don't have the money to compete, of course, with PIF. Are we seeing a changing on the decks, do you think, slowly but surely?
I think you hit the nail on the head without any confirmation anyway, Steve, that this business with Ashley in the financial business, money was required to change that. Her shares have gone to the Rubens, haven't they? They've gone up from 10 to 14, while Amanda's gone down from 10 to 6. It was stressed unofficially by the club that she remains very much the hands-on person with Jamie at headquarters, because the Saudi boys aren't at headquarters, of course. So the day-to-day running of the club Amanda and her husband and Jamie are the people doing that. But, you know, to the ordinary fan, this matters not a jot. And the way Newcastle's run, it matters not a jot. Because 80% trumps everything else. So it doesn't matter that if Amanda goes down, and the fact that the Rubens have gone up is still not going to make them any more powerful in the St James's Park boardroom, because 80% runs the show. And so the show is very much run by the Saudis. And at the moment, Jamie and Amanda and her husband run it at headquarters. So I think it's very much as you were in terms of the club and where it stands. And, you know, the future is not affected at all. What's affected is it probably Amanda's a little bit, you know, sad that because she did all the work in arranging this takeover anyway, a little bit sad that our holdings had to go down. But, you know, it needs must.
Also, John, her husband, I understand, he's being sued back in Saudi Arabia for a figure of somewhere around £50 million. I don't know what that's about. Have you heard anything at all?
No, I'm not with you on that one, Malcolm. I'm not with you.
Well,
obviously, you know, I've not seen anything about that.
You haven't heard anything on that?
Is it him or is it not? Is it not Al Ramayan? Is it not the chairman?
Oh, it's the chairman.
Oh, sorry, yes, the chairman's involved in something that could be legal. Yes, it's the chairman.
Right. What's that all about?
Hold on, I've just found it here because it's in the Guardian, Malcolm. I did see it. So it's not Mirdad Gaddousi. It's Newcastle chairman faces £58 million lawsuit for carrying out malicious instructions. Yasser Al Ramayan accused over work for Saudi Crown Prince. Exiled former Saudi intelligence chief was targeted. So yeah, it's actually Yasser Al Ramayan, not Mirdad Gaddousi.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm pleased I've got straight on that one.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think David McLeod's right. It does look like share shuffling between her and the Reuben brothers, and I think Amanda will be sad, but I think it was probably always the plan. She facilitated, of course, the Manchester City deal. The opposite way around, they did the Newcastle deal, and I think they will move on at some point.
But I think the Reuben brothers look on her as an ideal front person.
Oh yeah, I think the club do. Yeah, but they've now appointed people in those positions. Darren Eales is in there. They've got they've got Peter Silverstone in there. So they've now appointed those people, which I guess was always the remit to take them out of the spotlight a bit more each season. That's what's happening. Kenya Mags taking us back to a history lesson. What can John and Malcolm remember about the 6 games with Birmingham in 73-74 season? Was the final game with them the most bad-tempered John has seen and Malcolm played in?
I don't think it was 6. I think it was 5.
All right, okay.
But I stand to be corrected. And they got more and more bad-tempered as each game went past. Irving Nattrass got done nastily playing down at the Birmingham ground, and he was out for some while. I got done and was out. I think I had to go into a plaster cast, and I remember going to watch the last of the 5 games. And because I had a plaster cast on, there was nowhere in the stand that I could sit. So I went up to the press box, John. Yeah, which was up the spiral staircase on the roof.
Yes, it was on the roof.
Yeah. So I went up there to watch the game, and I shall never forget, because at the lunchtime, after some treatment in the morning, I had I'd gone with Jimmy Smith to Roy's 2 Rooms, and we had a bit of a sort of light lunch, and Jinky, of course, was playing that night, and in the conversation he said that he didn't like the tackle on Irving Nattrass. He said he didn't like the tackle on me, and that that somebody's going to suffer. And I said, oh, come on, Jimmy, don't get carried away like that. I said, just play the game for heaven's sake. And of course, that was the game that he did Tony want. And he did Tony want, and the crack, it was like a rifle shot around the ground. And he just walked off, Jinky. Just walked off, didn't need to be sent off because he knew that that's what was going to happen. And off he went. And he broke Tony Want's leg. And he was sort of getting back for what had happened to Irving Nattrass and myself.
I think what happened there, Malcolm, and just trying to remember, the games happened so quickly, which meant bad temper was carried over from one game to the next.
It was 5 games in 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, they happened in such a short space of time that the bad blood overflowed into every game, and it was started down at St Andrews, and as a result of the way Birmingham approached the games, they were nicknamed, not for the first time, the Brummie Bashers. And that was a nickname of the. I don't know whether I coined it in the paper at the time, but as Malcolm says, and we were sitting up in the crow's nest, which was the press box at the time, which was on the roof of St James's, and you could hear one's leg crack when he was tackled by Jimmy.
It was a rifle crack, wasn't it? Rifle shot.
And I tell you what was for the last thing on that crow's nest, which was the press box, which was right on top of the stand, the Milburn stand. In those days, this was before the Bradford fire business and the dreadful, awful tragedy that was. But that was a wooden stand, Steve. The roof was wooden, and the press box was on the top of it. And out of the back of the press box was a staircase as a fire escape.
It was a spiral staircase, John, wasn't it?
The staircase took you down onto the wooden roof of the stand. Now, if there was a fire, you may as well be Guy Fawkes if you're going on the wooden roof of the stand, because you're going to be on top of the fire. And I always said, that Newcastle had a great respect for the press, because our escape during a fire was to go on to be Guy Fawkes on top of the stand, and with the obvious way that was going to be. But I mean, that was safety first in those days, wasn't it? Have a fire escape that takes you on the top of a wooden stand.
Got plenty things coming in. Sean, good morning. He says, or good afternoon to you. Hi, all watching from Sydney. I've been watching the channel from the beginning. I love Malcolm and John, legends. I love all the programs, Steve. I met George and Steve Hasty at the Fulham game at Christmas. Thanks very much, Sean. Great to know we reach all the way around to the other side of the world. Tim, I would say no to this, but I'm not sure what the lads' opinion would be. Should we have offered Lascelles a new contract after what he did for us in Botman's absence? He's been exemplary in his attitude on and off the field. Howe has treated him badly, in my opinion. We can't keep a hold of everybody, and that's the problem. That's the problem. That's why we find ourselves in the position we're in. Eddie Howe didn't want to get rid of anybody. So because we haven't sold anybody at this moment in time, it hasn't balanced. The books haven't balanced for FFP. So we can't spend anything in January without selling somebody. So I understand the sentiment. I understand the reason that you would suggest that, Tim. But my genuine feeling on this is that, is Lascelles going to be improving next year and the year after that? No. He's not. No. And we've given Fabian Schär, Malcolm, and we've already given Fabian Schär a 1-year contract, who's also in his 30s. We can't build solid foundations on the over 30s, can we?
I mean, the amazing thing, Steve, is that, Tim was suggesting, and I can see where Tim's coming from, but he was suggesting that Eddie Howe's treated him badly. With respect, I think it's the exact opposite. Eddie Howe can be accused, if anything, of being too loyal to players. I mean, when you look at the situation, Dummett, Gillespie, the goalkeeper, and Ritchie were all out of contracts. And I mean, none of them are anywhere near the first team. When did Dummett last start a Premier League game? Ritchie's 33, 34. Gillespie's never started a Premier League game. But they got contracts. They got, and I tell you what, Lascelles, you're talking to be offered a contract now. If he wants to stay, as opposed to take up his career, and I often thought that Paul Dummett has wasted the end of his career because he's going to sit 3 years on the Newcastle bench and then retire and never play again. So he's already been there for a couple of years playing. If Lascelles wants to stay as opposed to wants to play, the difference, stay and play. If he wants to stay, he'll be kept on because Eddie will do that. The only thing that'll change that is if, as Steve says, the board go to Eddie and say, look, we have got to cash in. If a bid comes for Lascelles, we'll have to accept it because we've got to move some people out. We know no bids are going to come for Dummett or for Gillespie or for Ritchie at this late stage of career. No bids that are going to make any difference to Newcastle United because they're going to be under $1 million, aren't they? But I mean, Lascelles, because he's been such a loyal servant to Eddie before he came in the team for Botman, stuck round, didn't complain, led from the front, didn't cause trouble like, say, Fraser. He has been rewarded by getting back in the team and doing well, etc. His future's in his hands. He'll be allowed to stay as far as Eddie's concerned or go if he wants to play. The only thing that could disrupt that is the board saying, look, but the board will only say you've got to get rid if that person's going to bring some meaningful money in.
Sure. Yeah.
Because you've got to cash in on somebody. And my worry, guys, is that we don't cash in on somebody like Isak. Because you don't replace goals on your side. You don't, when you've got a guy that scores goals, and if you have a look at his record, 24 goals in 30-odd games or whatever. His goals per games record is phenomenal. And he looks a real footballer. He looks a Thierry Henry type of player. And he's only 24. He's got a huge future in front of him. I don't want us to cash in on him because you know what happens then? Your team doesn't get better. It gets worse because where are you going to get a better centre forward than Isak unless you get Haaland or something, which you're not going to get, and it's going to cost you 200 million.
Sure. One of the beauties about Isak is that he can play poorly but still score.
Correct. And that's the secret, Malcolm, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, you're not just scoring when you're playing well. He scores on that regular basis, whether he's playing well or not, whether he's carrying an injury or not. It doesn't matter.
Okay, Newcastle United are in the Supermac derby this weekend at Craven Cottage in the FA Cup, and it's a 7 o'clock start. It's live on TV, proper TV. You don't have to pay for it. ITV4 and ITVX. And just a reminder, because it has been confusing with the change of rules during COVID, if the scores are level after 90 minutes, a replay will be staged. So the FA listed the replay will take place on February the 6th, but that isn't fixed, and it could be altered, of course, for television purposes. The fifth round draw, if we are lucky enough to be in it, will be on Sunday, and that should be part of the fourth round ties that are being televised then. Fulham this week have had problems selling tickets for this match. They have put tickets on public sale, and anyone who needs to purchase a ticket would have to create an account on the website. There has been instances in the past, though, where, away fans have bought tickets like this. Fulham have cancelled the order when they've seen the postcode. But it's probably not advisable to do that unless you're prepared to sit on your hands. Newcastle were allocated P4 to P7 of the put in the end. There's no possibility of any extra tickets for them, I'm afraid. We've already sold out P1 to 3. Team news.
John, John, do you remember when you quite simply went and bought a ticket?
A ticket. The good old days.
That's a long time ago now, Malcolm, isn't it?
The good old days. And you used to go and watch more than one team. I know I've heard those stories. Unbelievable. Team news. Well, we don't know yet. Eddie Howe's press conference, of course, is on a Friday. It's always too early for this show. We do know Joe Linton's season is over. He has now had surgery on his thigh, which has been successful. There has been talk of him coming back in May, but the season finishes in May. I would imagine that's the last we've seen of Joe Linton this season, to be perfectly honest.
And perhaps for all time.
Well,
because
yeah,
we understand that they're a long way apart on a new contract.
Just another story that we're seeing in the papers this week. So let's hope that one isn't true, and let's hope they can sort that particular situation out. Murphy, though, Willock and Barnes are all in different stages of recovery. One would imagine, I would at least think one of those players will be available this weekend. They're all at various stages of returning from injury, though. Matt Targett and Elliot Anderson are also now on the comeback trail. There's no firm date for either of those returning. There was lots of rumours circulating potentially that Anderson's injury had another setback, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Eddie Howe probably will tell us a bit more in the press conference tomorrow. Callum Wilson is close to a return, not expected to play against Fulham. He is expected to return against Aston Villa next week. And Joe White is back on Tyneside after his half-season loan, at Crewe Alexandra is over. But he is cup-tied, so won't be in the squad for this particular game. Referee is Jared Gillette, which is the second game in charge of a Newcastle fixture. The first one was the Carabao Cup defeat at Chelsea. And on VAR, which we do have in this game, two Premier League teams clashing, of course, Robert Jones is on VAR. If you're interested in Fulham's team news, we don't have any other than Adama Traore remains unavailable. So there was a couple of questions in the chat, which I kept to one side. Lee said, lads, I've just tuned in. Not sure if it's been discussed, but surely the fact Fulham played a full strength 11 last night for the Carabao Cup game for 90 minutes will be an advantage to us. And Tom, of course, wanting to know what our predictions will be. So yeah, Malcolm, this game, it's a make or break for Newcastle season and Fulham season now, with Fulham out of the Carabao Cup. So it's a big game. But do you think last night the fact that they played 90 minutes will have an effect on this game at the weekend?
Not really. No. At this stage of the season, it won't make any difference. I don't think. In fact, it might be better for Fulham that they had the game. Newcastle haven't played for a fortnight by the time Saturday comes around. So, a lot of footballers, they like to keep constantly ticking over. This is a rather interesting game. And the reason why I say that is that we watched Newcastle absolutely murder Fulham. Albeit their goal scorer, Fulham's goal scorer, being sent off, and quite stupidly so. His actions were ridiculous in the tackle that he made. But I watched that game and I was not impressed by Fulham at all. But subsequently, I saw Fulham playing that first leg against Liverpool. I thought they were absolutely brilliant. Really brilliant, but Liverpool got two late goals, typical Liverpool, to win 2-1, and then of course the second leg last night, and again Fulham played really well. So Newcastle are going to be up against it on Saturday, for sure they are, and I can see one hell of a 90 minutes happening. And I'm thoroughly looking forward to it, I have to say.
Okay, your prediction for this one, Mal?
I have a feeling that it's going to finish a draw, and that we're going to have a replay back at St James Park. And of course, with Fulham having got beat last night, this is the last opportunity for both clubs to keep their season going. And so there's an awful lot riding on it. I think it will be a draw. I think we're going to see a replay back at St James Park, and I shall certainly look forward to witnessing that.
Okay, John, over to you.
Yeah, very, very interesting game. In lots of ways, I think it's a mind game, because Newcastle's build-up to this match has been muddied by all this speculation about whether we're going to lose at least one top player in the transfer market. I don't think we are, but certainly there was a genuine chance with Trippier and with Almiron. I don't think Wilson was ever, his head was turned a little bit, but he was ever going to be allowed to go on loan. Certainly not. But it hasn't been the best of build-ups, working on the training ground, etc., with players' heads being turned a little bit. Trippier's a good pro, Wilson's a good pro, Almiron's a good pro. But when you hear big clubs in for you, you know, it turns your head a little bit. And have they been focused correctly in the build-up? It has not been the best of build-ups. But I would like to think, because I'm biased, that it hasn't been the best of build-ups for Fulham, because they did play last night. But surely they are going to be bitterly disappointed that they were one game off. They should already be at Wembley in their minds. They had the chance to go to Wembley. They didn't lose at home to Liverpool, but they're not at Wembley. And that bitter disappointment, and they've got to pick themselves up within 3 days and go again and start all over again in the FA Cup to get to where they were last night. And I'm hoping that will, you know, the huge disappointment of not being at Wembley. That's why they couldn't sell the tickets to their own fans. Everybody was buying the ticket for last night because all the Fulham fans thought they're going to Wembley last night and are hoping. And now, you know, we're starting again. This is the beginning of the FA Cup run. We're not at the quarter-final stage or something. So I'm hoping that bitter disappointment will eat into the players a little bit, which would be to our advantage. But it's who reacts best to adversity. Do Newcastle react better after all this transfer speculation, or do Fulham act better after being so bitterly disappointed not to make Wembley already and be in the League Cup final? So it's the side that acts best to adversity. Forecast. My one genuine thought, and I hope to goodness I'm right, is that we will be in the 5th round. But I do think it could take, as Malcolm said, it could take a replay to do it. But you know what? I don't care. I just want to be in the 5th round. I don't care if it takes a replay. That's fine by me.
We're going to replay to see. Why not?
And I think we will be in the next round. I can see us winning on the day because we have had that rest, because the team virtually picks itself. There's good players in there, and I can see us sneaking it on the day. But if I had to give a result on the day, I think I would go for the draw. But the result I want to give is that I believe Newcastle will definitely be in the 5th round. And you know what? That's all that matters.
Okay, I'm going to go for a 2-1 win to Newcastle on the day. I think, I think all the controversy that we've seen in the papers will G the team up. I think the 2-week break will have done them a world of good. The fact that they've been away on, their own time, have had a time to spend with the family, etc. And I think we'll see a reaction from Newcastle. I think we'll see a big reaction. I think Fulham will be tired. So I'm going to go 2-1. I don't want to replay. It is a hard game, Kenya Mags. Not confident, so he would gladly take a replay. But genuinely speaking, I think a 2-1 win for Newcastle. We will find out who was right and who was wrong on that score. Of course, Newcastle, before we meet again, chaps, play Aston Villa in the Premier League. Now, that is a hard one. Tuesday the 30th, next week, live on TNT. I know it's difficult, Malcolm, because we've got a game before that. We don't know who's going to be available. But if you had to pick a scoreline now for Aston Villa next Tuesday against Newcastle, what would your prediction be?
I have a bad feeling about this one. They will want to get their own back for the humiliating start to the season that they had at St James Park. And if you remember, at Villa Park at the end of last season, they really murdered Newcastle. I think it finished 3-0. But oh dear, they were all over Newcastle. So I don't have a good feeling about that particular game. And I think that this is a game where Villa will beat Newcastle.
Okay, John?
Yeah, I think a lot depends on the result at Fulham. If
Yeah.
we're out of the FA Cup, we will be low in the snake's belly going to Aston Villa because, what's left? But, we are all forecasting that we won't be out of the FA Cup because we'll either get a draw or we'll win at the first go. That will be a huge help. Like Malcolm, I've got to say that in this particular game, I'm apprehensive. I think we will probably lose. But the points are to come after that because we've got a good run after that. And it starts with the second Supermac derby. After we play Fulham on Saturday, it's Newcastle against Luton next week. Now, there's 3 points that are going to be ours.
You would hope.
They're going to be ours. You know why? Because I said that down at Kenilworth Road, and what happened there? Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
no, I'm not holding out great hope for Aston Villa. And you know what that means? It's even more important we're still in the cup, guys.
It is. Great stuff, lads. Have a great weekend. Gibbo, I will see you tonight. Malcolm, see you next Thursday. Have a good weekend.
Indeed. Yes. Have a good night tonight, guys.
Thanks, mate. All the best. Keep the faith, boys.